Hello again, students. Miss Cordes here. Today we're going to be learning argument writing lesson number 2, the introduction. You should have already watched lesson number 1 on claim. This lesson, the introduction. The introduction is the paragraph that will contain your claim, so make sure that you understand what a claim is before moving forward in this video. Introductions have been called lots of things. The hook, the lead, no matter what you call it, the introductory paragraph does the following things. Make sure your paragraph does this. First of all, it is the first paragraph of your essay. Also, it begins by hooking your audience and giving us the big picture of your essay. We don't want to read something that just jumps straight out into the claim and tells us an argument. We want to be told something that makes us care. So this is where you pull your audience in. And then by the end of the introduction, you will present the claim, your central argument, in the last line. Many students stress about the first line. There's no need. Here are 3 different ways you could start your paper. This is the hook part, where you pull in your audience. The first idea would be to use a quotation from an outside source that relates uniquely to your upcoming claim. So for our example, we're still going to use the practice prompt, to what extent is reading important to my future? So I'd want to look on Google or on Bing, I'd want to look for examples of quotations that people have said about reading and why it's important, or the way that I'm going to talk about its importance in my claim. So one example would be this quote from Ray Bradbury. I might start my paper by saying, according to Ray Bradbury, author of Fahrenheit 451, you don't have to burn books to destroy culture. Just get people to stop reading them. Another example would be from the author Frederick Douglass. You might write this. Frederick Douglass once said, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. Either one of these quotations would be a really great way of hooking in your audience. This gives the audience some context, so many of them will know Ray Bradbury or have heard of Frederick Douglass, and then you can explain how the quote relates to your prompt later on in the introduction. One important thing to notice about using a quote is that none of these examples starts off right away with quotation marks. Both examples begin with a text. In this case, it's according to Ray Bradbury, and in this case, it's Frederick Douglass once said. That's an important thing to remember when using this technique, but we're going to talk about 2 other ones. The second option for starting your paper with your hook or your attention getter could be using an anecdote, which is a short personal or historical or literary story that relates to your upcoming claim. So here are 2 examples. They're a little bit long. I'm just going to read them to you quickly. For example, when I was a little girl, my most vivid memory was reading books with my parents before bedtime. We would curl up in my Power Rangers sheets with at least 3 books a night. 4 if I was really convincing. These stories filled my imagination, brought me all around the world on adventures, and taught me the values I still hold. This anecdote talks about the importance of reading to this author's childhood, and this introduction could lead into a great claim about why reading is important. The second example is more historical. The first one was personal. Let's read the blue example together. Nazi Germany was a time in history filled with fear. The government worked to control its citizens and encourage conformity. Through the process of regular book burnings, they were able to keep their citizens from freely thinking or questioning their practices. This anecdote is historical. It refers the reader back to a time in history that they could relate to or remember from learning on their own time. Either example would be appropriate for this particular prompt. There's still one more choice, though. If you're feeling more poetic, another great way to start an essay is with an example of a literary device. Usually simile, personification, or metaphor work the best to illustrate your upcoming claim. A simile would be, reading is like blank. You'd choose something to compare reading to. An example of personification would be here in green. A book speaks to you. Its pages have a heartbeat. This gives the audience a sense of how important exactly reading is to the author. So now that you know different ways to accomplish a lead or your opening line, you'll need to know the other parts of the introduction. The other 2 parts are really simple. The context, you want to give a few sentences about the background of the claim, and finally, you give us your claim. So, here's what a complete introduction would look like. Nazi Germany was a time in history filled with fear. The government worked to control its citizens and encourage conformity. Through the process of regular book burnings, they were able to keep their citizens from freely thinking